National insurance. If you're working here in the UK, chances are you and your employer are paying it. But do you actually know what it is? Or why we have it? If asked, many people think, understandably, it's like some kind of insurance. You pay in and you get healthcare from the NHS and a state pension. Simple, right? Wrong. National insurance is one of the most poorly designed, unfair and dysfunctional parts of our tax system. It's a relic from 1911 that's completely unsuited to 2025. It penalises young workers while letting wealthy pensioners off the hook, and it distorts the economy, killing jobs and making our tax system needlessly complicated. And almost nobody is talking about it. So today I'm going to explain where national insurance came from, how it's evolved to be one of the worst parts of our very badly designed income tax system, and why it creates massive intergenerational unfairness, and what we should do about it. Let's start with the history. National insurance was introduced in 1911 by David Lloyd George, a Liberal Chancellor. He'd visited Germany and seen Otto von Bismarck's social insurance system and thought we should have that. His famous slogan was 9 pence for 4 pence. So the idea was workers would pay 4 pence a week, employers would then add an additional 3 pence and the government would chip in another 2. And in return for that, you got sickness benefits and unemployment insurance. And here's the crucial bit. It was genuine insurance. You paid in, you got specific benefits out. And there was a real link between the contributions you made and what you received. So it only covered about 70% of the workforce, wage earners. And if you were self-employed, you and your family were out of luck. But for those it covered, it worked as advertised. However, we fast forward to 1948, a few things had happened in between, and Clement Attlee's government massively expanded national insurance to help fund the new NHS and welfare state. The system grows, but the contributory principle, the link between what you pay and what you get, starts to weaken as various credits are applied to ensure people aren't penalised for raising children or long-term illness. So through the 1950s and 60s, more benefits get added and accordingly the rates go up. But by the 1970s, it's one of our bigger taxes, but the insurance fiction is already starting to crack. In the 1980s and 90s, Thatcher and Major kept tinkering. The self-employed start to pay lower rates, credits get expanded for carers and the unemployed, and the link between contributions and benefits gets weaker with pretty much every reform. And then in the 2000s, Gordon Brown raids it again to fund the investment in NHS from his government. Those credits then got expanded further. And you can now basically get a full state pension with huge gaps in your contribution record as long as you've been caring for your children or sick relatives and things like that. So by 2025, the link between contributions and what you get is vanishingly weak. Yes, you still technically need 10 qualifying years to get anything, 35 qualifying years for the full pension. But here's what's changed. You can build those years without ever paying a penny in national insurance. If you're unemployed, you get credited contributions whilst claiming benefits. If you're sick, you are credited. If you're caring for children or elderly relatives, credits all cash up. And this ultimately means that 90% of people that reach the state pension age qualify for the full pension. Many of them with huge gaps in their actual payments record filled in by those credits. And don't get me wrong, these credits exist for a very good reason. We don't want to punish people for caring for children or their elderly parents. But it does mean that the insurance element has become pretty theoretical. Professor Judith Friedman, who's much more of an expert than I am, but she puts it that the current national insurance system is no longer what it was intended to be. It is not a contributory system anymore. So, if it's not insurance, what is it? Well, it's just become a badly designed income tax that politicians are too scared to merge with actual income tax because it would reveal the true headline rate people actually pay. So let's look at what national insurance actually is today. If you're employed and earning over £12,570 a year, you pay 8% national insurance up to £50,000, 270 quid. then it's 2% on everything above that. So your employer pays 15% on your earnings above 5,000, and now that's a threshold that Rachel Reeves slashed from 9,100 in her first budget last year. If you're self-employed, you pay a lower rate without employer contributions. But if you're a partner in a law firm or accountancy firm, you can structure it so you pay no employer national insurance at all on your partnership income. And if you're a pensioner, you pay zero, regardless of how much pension income you receive. So now, national insurance raises about 170 billion a year. It's the second biggest tax after income tax, and it supposedly funds the NHS and the state pension. But here's the thing, it's just shuffled into the general pot now. There's no real link between national insurance revenue and NHS spending. It's just income tax with extra steps, except it's worse than income tax in almost every way. Firstly, it's more complex. Employers have to calculate your earnings on two completely different systems. Income tax looks at your whole year's income. National insurance looks at each individual pay period, weekly or monthly. They have different thresholds, different rules. It's a compliance nightmare. Secondly, there's a lack of transparency. That 15% employer national insurance, you never see it on your payslip. Most people have no idea that their employer is paying an extra 15% on top of their salary. So politicians love this because they can raise employer NI and workers don't blame them, leading to Labour's fudge in the 2024 budget. But here's the dirty secret. Economists agree that employer national insurance is ultimately paid by workers through lower wages. It is a tax on you, you just don't get to see it. So when people say higher rate taxpayers pay 42%, that's 40% income tax plus 2% NI, that's only what's coming off your payslip. The reality is that for every £1.15 that your employer spends on you, the government's taking 57 pence in tax. So that's actually a rate of 49.6%, basically half. And a lot of people had no idea. So that's sort of the unwitting genius of national insurance from a political perspective. Effectively, it hides the true cost of government. But the real problem with national insurance isn't just that it's complicated and hidden. It's that it creates massive systematic unfairness. So let me show you 3 ways it does this. The first injustice is the intergenerational conflict. Here's a simple comparison. 2 people, both earning £30,000 a year. Person A is 25, working full-time. They pay 20% on income tax, 8% national insurance, a total rate of 28%. Person B is 70, receiving £30,000 a year. They pay 20% income tax and nothing on national insurance, total of 20%. Same income, but 8% difference in tax. Why? Well, because national insurance isn't payable after the state pension age. It also isn't payable on pension income or investment income. So wealthy pensioners living off generous final salary pensions and investment portfolios pay far less tax than young workers on the same income. Now you might think, well, they paid in when they were working. Fair enough, right? Except no, the demographic reality is very different. When national insurance was introduced in 1911, life expectancy at birth was about 51 for men and 55 for women. Now that headline figure was dragged down by the infant mortality rates, but if you made it to working age, you had a decent chance of reaching your 60s. Still, far fewer people lived long enough to claim a pension, and those who didn't claim it for very long. The state pension in 1908 was 70. Average life expectancy at 70 was just 9 years. The over 65s comprised about 5% of the entire population. Today, 19% of the population is over 65. So that's 11 million people. And by 2039, it'll be nearly 1 in 4. And they're not just living longer, they're also living with what's called multimorbidity. That means multiple chronic health conditions. And by 2035, an estimated 68% of the over 65s will have 2 or more long-term health conditions. Diabetes, heart disease, dementia, arthritis, all requiring ongoing expensive treatment. The NHS spends vastly more on older citizens. The state pension bill alone is now around 138 billion a year, and that's expected to rise to nearly 170 billion by the end of this Parliament, thanks to the triple lock. So, the baby boomers paid into a system when there were far fewer pensioners to support. Now they're retired, collecting pensions and using expensive healthcare, whilst paying no national insurance. Meanwhile, young workers are paying higher rates to fund this, whilst also trying to save for their own particularly worse pensions. For a lot of young people, it feels like a Ponzi scheme that will blow up before they ever see any benefit. Injustice 2 is the employment lottery. Remember I said the law firm's partners pay no employers NI? Well, here's why that matters. Imagine 3 people doing identical work, earning £100,000 a year. So they're doing well. Person A is an employer to bank. Their employer pays $14,250 in employer NI on top of their salary. Person B, self-employed, they pay lower NI rates, no employer contributions. Person C is that partner at a law firm. They're technically self-employed, no employer NI at all. Same work, same income, completely different tax treatment. This creates bizarre incentives. Suddenly it's worth structuring yourself as a partnership or as self-employed, not because it's better for the business, but purely for tax reasons. The Treasury Select Committee called this the 3-person problem and said major reform was long overdue. Injustice 3, it kills progressivity. Here's something most people don't know. National insurance is regressive at the top. Between 12,500 and 50,000, you pay 8% NI. Above 50,000, it drops to 2%. So when you hit a higher rate tax threshold, income tax goes up by 20 percentage points from 20 to 40, but national insurance goes down by 6 percentage points from 8 to 2%. The net effect is that your overall marginal rate only goes up by 14 points, not 20. And employer NI, completely flat. 15% whether you earn 20,000 or 2 million. And this undermines the whole point of having progressive taxation. It dilutes it horribly. So we've established that national insurance is not actually insurance, hideously complicated, regressive, unfair between generations, unfair between employment types, and a jobs tax. So in plain terms, it sucks. But could we fix it? Could we patch it up and make it work? That seems what most chancellors seem to try and do nowadays. But I don't think we can, because the fundamental economic model it's based on no longer exists. National insurance was designed for an industrial economy by Edwardians, where most income came from wages. People worked until pretty much they dropped dead. The elderly were a tiny minority. Pensions and investments were for the rich, and we now thankfully live in an economy where huge amounts of income come from pensions, property and investments. People live 30 plus years in retirement. Nearly 1 in 5 people are pensioners, and middle class wealth is tied up in property and pensions. National insurance only taxes earned income. All that pension income, all those property portfolios, all those investment returns, zero NI. In 1949, employment income dominated. After 1979, investment income and pensions started growing as a share of total income. Today, for pensioners, occupational pensions and investments are often their largest income sources. The tax base has shifted, but national insurance hasn't. You can't run a 21st century welfare state on a tax designed for 1911. So what do we do? And the answer is conceptually very simple. Merge national insurance with income tax. Tax advisors have been saying this for decades. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says it, the Office of Tax Simplification said it, Treasury Select Committee said major reform was long overdue. Just combine them. have one tax on income with one set of thresholds, one set of rates. You could still have different rates for different types of income if you wanted. You could charge a lower rate on pension income to protect current pensioners who planned around existing rules. Or you could gradually phase in a higher rate to finally make wealthy pensioners pay their fair share. But the key, as always, is transparency. Everyone would see the true headline rate they're paying. No more hidden employer contributions, no more two parallel systems creating bizarre incentives. So, why won't politicians do it? And I think it's because it would reveal that the basic rate of tax isn't really 20%. It's more like 28%. And the higher rate of tax isn't 40%. It's 42% or closer to 50% when you include employer contributions. Here's the historical irony. The last person to truly revolutionise British taxation was David Lloyd George, the same Liberal Chancellor who created national insurance in 1911. His People's Budget of 1909 introduced progressive income tax, land taxes, and laid the foundations for the welfare state. It was so radical that the House of Lords rejected it, triggering a constitutional crisis. Lloyd George was also the last Liberal Prime Minister. And perhaps that's why politicians have been so cautious ever since. Genuine tax reform is politically dangerous. It creates winners and losers. It's easy to attack. It's far easier to tinker around the edges, add complexity, and hope nobody notices. But somebody should notice, because the system we've got isn't working. And it's time for honesty. It's time to scrap national insurance. Anyway, if you found this useful or interesting, share, like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm. Show this to more people who care about getting our tax system fixed. Next time round, I want to look at why council tax is the stupidest tax in Britain. Yes, we are still using house valuations from 1991. I do hope to see you then. I'm Jamie from Accounts, and I still believe if we fix tax, we can fix Britain. Thank you.